Pour yourself a nice Chianti and sit at the table as we dine with Dr. Hannibal Lecter in 1991's big Oscar winner, The Silence of the Lambs. Don't go anywhere.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. I wasn't planning on doing that, and it's not something you're sure if you can do. Much like Anthony Hopkins, it was spontaneous. He wasn't planning on doing that, and he did it. So, but welcome, everybody. Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. So glad you could join us. It's always an honor to have our returning listeners check us out, and it's always an honor as well for new listeners. So welcome aboard. If this is your first episode, pull up a chair. We're going to have a fun conversation. We geek out about movies, sometimes some bad impressions. We give you some factual information as well. It's just a fun time. We've got a great cast of guests with us as well. If you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. That helps get you notified of when new episodes drop. And then it helps us in the algorithm to push us up further, because there's millions of creators on YouTube, and we're just one little tadpole swimming with all the other ones in the school, like a school of fish, Eric, right?
That's right. But many.
We're but a tadpole, but one day we will grow into a strong bullfrog. Warts and all.
We're tears and rain at this point.
Tears and rain. like a tear in the rain from Rucker Hauer.
Yeah.
So we've got a great episode coming up for you. This is number 3 in our second year of Oscars month in March. So that's always a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. We've kind of made this a new kind of tradition where we take the month of March and we do 4 Best Picture films. Although I'm thinking already towards next year, we may do Best Actor or Best Actresses. We might mix it up because we'll run out of fun stuff to do, Eric. So we're going to need to go into, it's bad if we're doing like Best Editing. Like if we've exhausted the well and we're doing like Best Editing episodes, we got problems. We've probably should retire it then at that point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong to appreciate that, but yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
But, but we've got plenty of episodes before the well runs dry. So we've got a humdinger tonight. We've got 2 great guests. Let's start off with he didn't make a name, Dr. Nick Leshy.
Not this time, yeah. I was like Nick the Cannibal or something. I was like, I don't know. That would have been too freaky.
You could have put Nick Crawford. That would have been good. That
would have been
apropos for you. So Nick Leshy is the creator of the City of Kick blog. You can go check that out. We always put a link in the show notes to that. And there will be one in this episode as well. So go ahead and check out what Nick is doing. A lot of great entertainment writing about all types of things, whatever tickles his fancy. So go check that out as well. And like I said, there'll be a link in the show notes there. Also, where is she? There she is. She's got the Blade Runner poster behind her. Movie fan extraordinaire, somehow related to the co-host of the show as well, because they share the same last name, Kelly Kuber.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. Hun.
We'll see what happens after the show.
No.
So yeah, welcome aboard, Kelly. Great to have you here as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're talking, like we said, about Silence of the Lambs, a big winner in 1991. We've got a little trivia about that. We'll see if anybody's up to the challenge to answer that trivia question. But for right now, let's talk about the stats. This was released in February of 1991, directed by Jonathan Demme. Screenplay by Ted Talley, based on the novel by Thomas Harris. A meager, paltry, tiny $19 million budget. But a massive, boffo, humongous, huge, giant $272 million box office. Really nice. Yeah, this was a runaway success. It won a bunch of Oscars. Let's see. Does anybody know what the Big Five is when we talk about Oscars?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Nick, what's the Big Five?
Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Director, and then Best Screenplay, whether it's adapted or original.
Exactly. That's called the Big Five in Oscar land. There have only been five films that have won the Big Five: Best Picture, Director, Actor, Actress, and Screenplay. Only 3 pictures have ever done that. It happened one night, which was 1934, and then it didn't happen again until 1975. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and then 1991 was the third time that the Big Five Oscars were scored by one film. Plenty of movies have gotten the requisite amount of nominations to qualify, but only 3 films have done what we call run the table with the Big Five in Oscar world of winning. So
now, if some movie had won like Best Picture and then the top 4 acting categories, that still wouldn't be like director and screenplay. Like it wouldn't count as like sweeping the top or something like that, right?
Yeah, because supporting actor and supporting actress aren't.
They're like secondary.
We're not saying that they're not prestige awards.
Yeah.
I would certainly take a Best Supporting Actor Oscar. I just wouldn't say, well, I don't want this because it's not not part of the Big Five. But when they talk about like that top tier, the headline Oscar awards. Those are the top 5. So this did that. It was nominated for a couple of other ones, but it didn't win.
I'd take an Oscar for sweeping the floor. After the show was done. Yeah.
Best theater cleanup goes to the Lowe's on Main Street in Anytown, USA.
Hey, there you go.
Least sticky floor goes to. They should do those.
Hey, why not? Right.
Most comfortable seating.
Would that be considered the technical awards, the ones that don't air, the ones that they do like 2 days prior to the big event?
I think they would be the social awards. I think it should be like the crowdsourced awards that they like that, right? There would be the Oscars, the technical awards, and then like the social awards. Stuff that we vote on and the ones that we that mean a lot to the moviegoer, right? We're the ones in those seats and enjoying the experience.
That's true.
Although most theaters nowadays have pretty comfortable seats. I think they've all kind of upped their game. Not all of them have I was in the theater Saturday. Mm-hmm. And they have the nice seats, but I was looking for the recline button. I'm like, oh crap, this doesn't have the recline buttons, this one. Mm-hmm. But they were still comfortable seats anyway, so it's all good. Mm-hmm. I was like, how far we've come from the fold down wooden thing. It's like creaking when you sit in it, and you're like, "Oh my god, is it going to make it through the film?" Like, Eric and I have a story about me already breaking a wooden chair. So when I see a wooden theater seating, I kind of get a flashback of hearing the splintering, creaking wood, and then the devastation that was following. Anyway.
Yeah, they're still around though. I think there's some theaters that still they want to do it that way. They want to go. Probably
the dollar theater, I'm sure. Like, right, the $2 theater, probably.
It was one actually where my parents in the Poconos. They had one on the main road there, 209, and it was great because it just reminded me of then somehow mysteriously the next time we went to visit, the place had gone up in flames. So I guess they were looking to retire and they're looking to get out, and I guess insurance.
It was all that wood seating. It's like tinder, dried old wood. It's like a matchbox.
Well, you know what you talk when you walk in and the place has that stale popcorn.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's like it's embedded in the carpeting. That's how
It's like going into a museum. It's like visiting a museum. Walking
the kernels are like.
Your feet are.
Don't walk in there with bare feet. You cut your feet to ribbons because of the dried popcorn kernels and
and your
feet and whatnot. Yeah,
they make that sticky noise. The soles of your feet because it's like the popcorn grease. So anyway, we've come so much farther. We've come so far since then. So let's talk about this. First off, Silence of the Lambs. Anybody see this in the theater when it came out? Anybody?
I did.
2, 3. Mm-hmm. Kelly, no.
No, I was 14.
Okay.
So
some of our guests have accessed R-rated films underage, so I'm not going to judge.
No, I was
whether or
trying
not
to
you
think
have seen it.
No, because I remember it being a VHS classic in my household as opposed to going and seeing it.
But you had read the book though prior to seeing the film, right?
Yes, that was I'm sure Dean will probably get there, but that was my first exposure to it. This is the first movie I ever saw that I had read the book first.
That's so cool.
So I was super excited. But then I was doing the math and I was like, that means I read the book when I was 12 or 13. I should not have been reading this book. But it was so good. And it was, the book itself was so great. And I was so excited to see it. And I was so happy with,
Well, let's go there, because I don't think any of us, I certainly haven't read the book. Is it much different? Did it vary much from what you can recall from?
So, that's the thing is I don't remember now exactly, because I haven't reread it since because I love the movie so much that I've watched it, all this time. But I do remember it being pretty faithful, because when I was watching it, I was like waiting for certain things and I was like, oh yeah, that was the first viewing. And then after that, it was kind of just settling into the movie itself.
Yeah, Thomas Harris wrote a series of books, about this character or this universe, which were made into films. But this is kind of, there was a movie made before by Michael Mann called Manhunter, which kind of came and went and didn't really do much. People kind of didn't really think much of it. And there was a character in there called Hannibal Lecter, played by Brian Cox, who was a nobody back then. He was literally, Brian Cox is a big actor now, but back then it was like William Peterson was like the biggest, and Joan Allen wasn't big yet either.
Well, William Peterson for CSI, so he wasn't really.
Yeah, he wasn't anything either. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And he was like the biggest name,
Right.
So this was kind of one of Michael Mann's kind of stylish films that he was making. It was kind of more. Michael Mann was kind of the bigger. Dennis Farina was in it, who would go work on Crime Story. Yeah. With another Michael Mann vehicle. So Silence of the Lambs kind of comes out in 1991, and people. Yeah, I saw it in the theater. I was interning at WFAS, which is a local radio station. It's defunct, but I was an intern, so I would be like one of the schmoes at the movie theater, like. Giving out the swag and stuff like that beforehand. And I got my parents' tickets, and they went to go see it. So I saw it when it came out too. And I was just like, oh my God, this is, it's almost too much to take.
But it was one of those movies that, the poster had no idea. It's just one of those strange, what the hell is this? If you weren't familiar with the book, which I wasn't, but I had seen Manhunter. And I didn't make that correlation because I didn't know, it was the same character or characters. But I just remember Manhunter being to me, it felt like a movie version of Miami Vice. It was very neon, very 80s, very,
slick.
It's very slick. Yeah. Him working on Miami Vice at the time, I guess that's, they kind of crossed that over or whatever in style. But I just remember seeing the poster and I'm like baffled by it. Like, what is this? But I had, even when I saw it, I was like, okay. But it's one of those movies that just really get in there, and the poster kind of reveals a lot. But we'll get to that as we talk about it. But it's just, yeah. But yeah, it was shocking. It was, suspenseful, scary. It was, it kind of blew my mind. I didn't realize how good it would be, but it was great.
Yeah, I'm curious, obviously, Kelly, you read the book, so that what drew you. But back then, that was I would go see any movie that came out. That was like the start of the 90s. I just went to every single movie. This was February 14, like Valentine's Day when this opened, right? So I didn't know what to expect. I just went in. I liked Jodie Foster. She was one of my favorite actresses at the time. But I went in and I was like, wow. But yeah, the poster didn't really say much about it. Even Anthony Hopkins wasn't. I mean, I remember him from a mini series or something, and he. So I was in. What drew you, Dean? What made you say I want to go see this movie? Or was it the poster, Eric? I don't know.
Yeah, it was the same. Well, I was interning at WFAS, so I was going because I got to go free. But that's you're right. That was still the era where I was actively going to movies that. Yeah. I don't remember that I even knew Anthony Hopkins was in it. I loved Anthony Hopkins from The Elephant Man, which I saw when that came out, and it had a big effect on me on my movie going and love of film. And then he virtually disappeared. Again, Anthony Hopkins wasn't a big marquee name either. Jodie Foster was kind of the biggest thing for this.
True.
And she had to really kind of go out there and try and get the role because Jonathan Demme had just finished up Married to the Mob. So he offered it to Michelle Pfeiffer first because he really liked her. And they offered her $2 million. And she said, no, I'm going to take a pass on it. Plus it's a little, not my kind of material. So then Jodie Foster came in, was really lobbying for it. And Jonathan Demme was very, very impressed. Gene Hackman was actually cast as Crawford. He was actually cast as it, but he ended up walking away. He thought it was too violent.
Yeah.
Actors considered for the Hannibal Lecter role range from Al Pacino.
I wouldn't see that.
De Niro, Hoffman, Derek Jacobi, Daniel Day-Lewis. Forrest Whitaker stated that he auditioned for the role as well. Even Morgan Freeman. I mean, Christopher Lloyd. There was a who's who.
Sean Connery came pretty close to getting it.
Yes.
Oh no! What'd you do?
Yes. Agent Starling.
Oh man, I can't see it. I just can't. Oh.
He'll be in the cell. That's the Chicago way. Yeah, I couldn't. It might have been interesting, but Anthony Hopkins kind of seemingly came out of nowhere, and I think that's what catapulted him. Obviously, people in Hollywood knew who Anthony Hopkins was. He was around for a long time. But if you had attached a De Niro to this, or it would have been so gimmicky, especially since De Niro did like Cape Fear, which was around this time, right after Goodfellas, and he did the Max Cady character, and it's kind of the psycho, and so we, it would have been too gimmicky, I think. The fact that even Brian Cox, now people are look at Manhunter now with reverence and like, oh my God, this is like an understated classic, and Brian Cox's take on it is something is special in itself too.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, seeing the name Anthony Hopkins, I remember him from Magic.
Yeah.
Remember the 70s movie?
With the puppet.
I might have seen that at the Pickwick, by the way. I mean, it might have been the local theater we had in Dobbs. But I do remember seeing that. But he's that kind of actor, like he's that very intense. Even in The Elephant Man, he's sort of, and then he does stuff like the Bounty, and where he goes he's off, half cocked half the time. So I thought it was right. I mean, from the get-go, I say, Anthony Hopkins, what is this? This must be something, not, this isn't your typical like cop movie or anything like that. So it definitely had some deep things going on in it, I think, so psychologically. So I think that was probably, and of course it was, but Brian Cox, on the other hand, he gave it all he had to, I remember, and he did a great job. And when I think back on that film now, I hadn't seen it in a while, but but I didn't appreciate it at the time, so, but.
Yeah, he was, I read he was intimidated by like Jodie Foster. Like this just shows like where he was in his career. Here's a guy who's been acting since, decades up until this point, but wasn't in that stature yet that he is now that we know of him. So Jodie Foster, like Dean said, she was the big name. She was from the 70s, and her award nominations, and then I think she had just won for Accused, right? So she comes in and to hear that Anthony Hopkins was intimidated to perform with someone, like he was worried about the choices he was making. He didn't want to be like overacting or anything, and yet he stole the show. I would say, like he just really did a great job.
Yeah, it was just masterful, a masterful performance, and that I think that's probably going to be the crux of this conversation. Is probably Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins, because that really is what this movie really is about, that relationship and those two. This is almost like an actor's film, really, of watching just two totally different type of actors. Jodie Foster, like Nick said, had just come off of winning in '89, I think, for The Accused. So she had gotten her first Oscar already. Wanted this part very, very badly, very strongly. And he said Anthony Hopkins, I think around the time of Elephant Man, he was an alcoholic and he was struggling with that. So that kind of affected his career a little bit too. And then all of a sudden now he kind of, 1991, they see this very strange well-mannered person with eyes that rarely ever blink. They don't. What I noticed about this is they said his eye, like he doesn't really blink. He does blink, but his eyes never fully close when he blinks. It's very unsettling. Like if you go watch, this is a film of a lot of close-ups, and a lot of it is faces. A lot of it is faces delivering lines right to the camera. And you watch Anthony Hopkins, he doesn't blink, but when he does blink, he actually doesn't even close his eyes fully, almost enough just to kind of wet them so they don't dry out, which is it's a weird thing too. It becomes a character trait that adds to the creepiness of it.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Nick?
No, I was going to talk about that. Just like how he looks so still and so, but it's his eyes that just look kind of crazed or something. So I was almost going to toss it to you, Kelly, and just be like, how do they describe him in the book? Like, did he have anything to work with that? Or was it just...
Yeah, I think that, there wasn't, he definitely embodied the persona so much more than it's even described. And that's what I was going to say when you were going through like the list of actors that were like set. I'm like, absolutely not. Like just the one scene where he has the baton and there's no one else I can picture making you believe that, like that feeling. But what I was going to say about like his eyes, when they first meet up, when she first walks up to the glass, goes to talk to him, his eyes are almost clear. The way that they were lit and everything, they weren't even, they were like see-through. And then a little bit later on, you notice that they have like a deeper blue. And it's like, depending on what, like where the conversations are, they really played up on that. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how they got it to, to do that, but it was amazing. And it really did sell the idea that he's just this, it's all in his mind. Mm-hmm. It's all his brain, more than, anything else.
Yeah. And I think people might think of the character as an apex predator. I think of him more as a cat that plays with a mouse. Like he doesn't have to kill. He enjoys toying. He enjoys the thrill of the hunt. He enjoys the thrill of the interaction. And that's why with the whole quid pro quo scene, he doesn't want, he doesn't just want the file about Buffalo Bill or what they have. He wants the interaction. He wants some type of social payment, right? And where tell me about when you were young and tell me this. And when Clarice returns to get more information, he says, "No, we have to pick up where you were living on a horse farm and you ran away and pick up the story." And more like a cat that is playing with a mouse that is deciding not to kill it.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know if he's actually toying with her though. I want to say that he's legitimately trying to establish. When you mentioned social, I think that I think it's establishing that he is a human being and he is a doctor and he genuinely cares about what happened to her and because she establishing that relationship with her. And I always thought that was the most interesting aspect of those scenes, because the back and forth and he's, more or less teaching her more than anybody else is teaching her in the film. You compare him to like Jack Crawford, who is just very, very dry and just kind of like stoic and just like he's like telling her only what she needs to know kind of thing. Even the scene where, they do the autopsy and he's like, he sends her out of the room and, and he's like, if anybody's toying with her, it's him, I think, in that scene where he's like, so you didn't like it very much when I sent you out of the room. She's like, no, I thought that burned me. That was, yeah. And he's like, why? And he's like, well, cops, they have a certain impression of you. And I didn't appreciate that. He's like, well, okay, well, point taken. And he just turns around and no apology, no nothing. He just turns around and he's like looking straight ahead. And Lecter would have said, I think, oh, I'm sorry. Like in his own way, he probably would have apologized or, admitted that he might've been maybe mistaken or something. So I just think it's a very interesting character dynamic there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think too, like it's the relationship between, she's honest with him. She's like genuine, like the first instruction that Crawford gives is like, don't say anything personal, just stick to the script. And she totally ignores that. Like she just right from the beginning. And I think he's testing her by asking her these questions because that's how he gets into people's heads. I have a feeling like he has these relationships with Crawford and Dr. Chilton, right? Because there's a history. Even if you haven't seen Manhunter or read the books, you kind of get from the script that he knew these people and so he's testing her. And right from the beginning, he likes everything that she tells him. But there was that point when he was like, okay, just go. I'm not going to do it. And then, of course, the awful masturbatory scene, right? And then he feels guilty and decides to give her a clue. But she's honest with him. It's like I don't know. And it's endearing, too, that this character, maybe because of what you were saying, Eric, about how she feels like she's a woman in this, career that's surrounded by men and they all look at her. And, the story makes that a point, how it's like, they don't think she's good enough. She's not going to pass the physical things. And, right. But I love that dynamic between Hannibal Lecter and her.
Even to the point, you make a good point about how, there is this dynamic also of a woman in law enforcement, or this woman in the FBI. And Jonathan Demme takes great pains to frame a lot of scenes. There's like the scene in the funeral parlor. Mm-hmm. When Jack Crawford leaves and Clarice is standing in the middle of the room with all these guys that are significantly taller than her. And she's in the middle by herself. And there's another scene like that in the beginning with all the FBI guys, where she's standing with all these FBI guys and they're all like towering above her to make her seem so small and like fragile, like a starling bird, like that she's this fragile bird. But it's also kind of a statement on how women are perceived. Kelly, right? I think there's that kind of side thing going there as well, and Lecter kind of gives her the respect that she's earned, and not judging her by her height or by how her stature.
Right. I always loved how she has a partner in crime in her roommate and co FBI, initiate or whatever, however you want to say, but because they're together, they like play off of each other. You can tell that they're strong together. They are going through this, but they're holding their own. And that's something that I felt that they did a really great job. Yeah, there were some scenes where they made her small, but then there's also these scenes where, the close-ups, like you're saying, where you can read everything and you can see her brain turning. And even though she may be small in stature, her mental capacity is right there in line with his.
Yeah, she figures out the clue about the name, that it's a false lead, it's fool's gold, right, too. But also at the beginning of the movie, when she's doing the training, right, there's that point where, the trainer kind of points to guys like, you're dead. You didn't look over your shoulder around the corner, right? And then later when she's going through the house, you see she does look around. Like she picks it up. She learns this stuff. Like, so she's a great character.
Yeah, very, very insightful character. And that's why Jack Crawford probably picked her. Now, there is one thing that I found very obvious in Clarice Starling kind of has a uniform, and she always wears green. Mm-hmm. And is that because she's green? Because she's literally green? She literally has no experience because she wears a green overcoat. But then if you notice later in the movie, she takes off the overcoat and she's wearing a green sweater. So I think, that symbolism is not only there in kind of making her look diminutive among her peers as someone who's new, but even in her color scheme she's literally green in the fact that she's so new. Which I kind of found interesting. It was kind of a nice little symbolism to pick up on.
Yeah, I never thought of that. But Kelly and I were commenting last night when we were watching it about how like Hannibal describes her and how she comes from a sort of poor upbringing, and she's in a small town, and you definitely see that. You could definitely see how she wears her makeup. The lipstick isn't quite right. It's kind of cracked. It's like it's too red for her complexion. So he's right on the money there, and it's true. And then when she starts to reveal these things about herself and where she came from and her dad and all that, and but I never Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right about the green. That's an interesting point.
Yeah, and when she leaves after her first meeting with Lecter, what does she look at the parking lot? Her car, and it's a Pinto. Probably like the poorest car, right? The person that's that doesn't have a lot of money. It's probably the only thing they could afford is a Pinto. So Lecter wasn't right about everything because he thought the father worked in a coal mine. Her father was actually noble. He was a police officer. He was a deputy or a sheriff. But he was right overall, and he was really cutting to the heart. It was very funny when Clarice goes to visit Lecter for the first time. All we have ever heard is that he's a killer. Jack Crawford, you don't want Hannibal Lecter in your mind, running around in your mind. So, and as Clarice is walking towards Lecter, we get to see like 3 other inmates or people in there, right? And you're getting ready, and that's where the movie kind of fools you a little bit. You're getting ready. You hear about a serial killer, a cannibal. You're getting ready to see a monster. And the first reveal is him just like standing there with a perfect white t-shirt, very straight, very, very great posture, very almost regal or noble looking. Like he's almost like a king standing there waiting for an audience, I thought it was a very interesting play on that because they're trying to build up like the things that this guy did, and he's horrible. And then you see these other, awful guys beforehand. And then you get to the very last cell. And that was part of what Jonathan Demme is. If you notice all the other cells have bars. And he didn't want, Jonathan Demme was like, we got to have a way to not have bars because we want that intimacy we want to feel the intimacy. And that's where they came up to put the glass. So this way, when you're looking at these characters, it's through the glass and there's no bars. So it is almost like a more interpersonal relationship because there's not the literal bars separating them, even though there's the glass. So it kind of created that extra bit of intimacy. And Lecter is craving those intellectual conversations as much as he's a killer, right? As much as he's got a passion and desire for killing, he's got a passion and desire for the intellectual stimulation, and not just reading a file necessarily, like we said, but having someone to come and that's gonna challenge him a little, Nick.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Again, the first time she sees him, one of the inmates, calls her just like profane name, and Hannibal's first test is like, "What did he just say to you? I didn't really hear that." And I'm curious if he did hear it. And his test, because obviously it's a test, and he says, you passed the test. You were honest with me and said it right up front, even though it was an uncomfortable word. And then that plays up later because then after he does that awful thing to her when she's leaving, you find out that Hannibal kind of has been whispering things all night to him, and he commits suicide, the other inmate, right? So it's like kind of like, I can just picture him just sitting back and just saying these awful things to get into his head, whispering them all night long. Because then they say you heard him crying all night, and then the next morning he swallows his tongue, and
Miggs.
Miggs.
He gets Miggs to kill himself.
The master manipulator is Lecter,
just
right?
like that. You don't need to do anything. Just like words alone can get into that guy's head.
Just and he's an artist, his drawings, and he loves classical music, and he's very high class.
Loves to cook,
obviously. Yeah. So I mean, you really, this is not a kill, but even it doesn't matter what status you are, I guess. I mean, it's just and perhaps that's just he's fascinated by the people that he's looking to kill or looking to, maybe that's the thing. It's like he gets off and he knows these people so well intellectually that perhaps, you're on the menu tonight or something, but yeah, I mean, it throws you. But I think I maintain that the relationship between him and Starling's different. I don't really see like any manipulation there. Perhaps, I mean, he's trying to goad her just to reveal something of herself. And I don't think it has anything to do with wanting to lead her astray or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a genuine, albeit twisted relationship, which you find out in the next book, in the next movie, of course. But it kind of goes in a weird place, but it's like, but she kind of needs that too, in a way. Like she feeds off of him as well. So it's like he's, so.
Strange attraction.
Yeah.
Strange attraction.
Yeah.
And he's so mannered, like you say, and he loves the arts, and yet you can't deny he's a cold-blooded serial killer, psychopath, sociopath, right? Like they have to like put a mask on his face when he's in a straitjacket.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm like, what do they think he's gonna do? Like snap somebody's like. It just shows what a danger he is, right, Kelly? I mean, it's insane.
Yeah, I was just thinking he is the definition of the guy next door that you would have never had any idea what he was doing behind closed doors. Because in society, he's like a upper echelon. He's who a lot of people are striving to be, right? Successful and brilliant and all these things. And then once he gets behind those pains, he is a monster. He's, he's back there. You can't even let him out without the, and I was noticing for the first time exactly how tight that was against the bridge of his nose and everything. When I was watching it, I was like, that, to think that he was just out there before this, able to just be among us.
That was that metal mask. That was that first metal mask.
Yeah.
That the smarmy Dr. Chilton put
oh my goodness,
put on him like go ahead, Eric.
no, you mentioned Chilton. I wanted to point out when Kelly mentioned the lighting and the way certain things were lit, and we're talking about eyes. Consider the very first time you see Chilton when he takes her down to that little hallway before all the cells, and the room is lit up in complete red. It's like it's almost like she's descending into hell or something. But look at his eyes are so black in that scene, like Chilton's eyes, and they're like you could see just a little hint of like light, and it always makes his eyes look like snake-like. And again, that kind of feeds into the idea of who this character is and what he is. And I had never noticed that, until last night when we watched it. I was like, wow, that was a great shot. So he really knew how to set these characters up. The cinematographer and Tak Fujimoto, I think is Fujimita. Is it
Fujimoto?
Fujimata, yeah. Did a marvelous job with that, and the lighting in this film was remarkable. But it was but that actually scared me. Like it unnerved me. Like the look on his face, because he's just such a dick in the movie, there's no other way to say it, but and obviously, Lecter being his prize, like he almost treats him like he's because I have Hannibal Lecter, but man, before he brings her in there, or lets her go in there, just next time if you ever watch it again, look at his eyes in that scene. It's just creepy as hell.
He's a despicable character, right? That shows him right away you just dislike him, right? Because he's hitting on her. He's like, let's go out to dinner, and like just flirting, like almost like, I'm giving you an honor, like you can come out with me, like just from the beginning. And then he walks her to it, and then he gets upset when she's like, I could go the rest of the way. He's like, well, if I'd known, I wouldn't have come all the way down. Like, you hate him. Like, he's just so, and then you could see why Hannibal Lecter also doesn't like him. But it tells you something where here's this serial killer, does all these brutal things. And at the very end, the punchline, when you see what's going to happen, the comeuppance, that you kind of like are on his side. You're kind of like, okay, right, Kelly?
I love when she says, but then I wouldn't have had the pleasure of your company. She's just like so
trying to smooth him over.
I love that.
Yeah, and the punchline at the end, I'm having a friend for dinner. It's like at that point we're in on the joke, and like Nick says, we're kind of happy that he's out there, and I think we're happy that he's out there because he blatantly says to Starling, like, I'm not coming after you, like I don't have any interest in you. So it's kind of like, okay, he's not going to come and threaten the heroine. Like she's kind of safe, so he can go. It's almost like, you can go kill whoever. Like we don't kill whoever else you want. It's fine. As long as you don't kill her, and I think that's what kind of made us kind of at the end. He became like an anti-hero,
right? Yeah. But then she says, "I can't make that same promise." Like she has to follow justice and get him behind bars, So I thought that was great.
But just the idea of him wanting just a simple view, and that's all he wanted. He's going through all this just to get a view out his window, so that's something that he could look out into the world and feel a little bit of humanity again, despite what he does. Obviously, he doesn't think it's what he's doing is wrong, or maybe he does, but in his, but to him it's a normalcy. But to be locked up like a caged animal, doesn't sit well with him. And he just and throughout the whole movie, that's all they refer to is that view, and that's such a big deal. Even when he meets up with the mother of the girl, which we need to get to. By the way, we need to get to the point of why Starling is talking to Hannibal Lecter, and because they're looking for another serial killer.
Yeah.
The great Ted Levine.
Can I mention the view though? Like it's
sure. Yeah.
Obviously, that's part of his humanity. You see the artwork and he likes the music. But I also wonder if they think like even having any kind of stimulation beyond the cell might spark some way like he could escape. Like it's amazing, like him getting a paperclip or a pen or something like that. That's all he needs, and it's like boom, he can escape and do all this mayhem.
Yeah, he needs to be deprived of that. I mean, we can't forget of the things that he did. So he is a monster. Mm-hmm. Although and that's the thing. That's kind of the play of this movie is he's likable because he's intellectual. He's not a sadistic monster in the way he acts and the way he talks, and he's very elegant and very well spoken. And so that kind of but it's still terrifying because he has a cadence, he has a way of talking that is also very, very distinct, and it can sound pleasurable in casual conversation, but then when he presses, and it becomes quicker and more intense. The same way of speaking, but it becomes more intense and quicker and faster and more demanding. That it becomes more terrifying. Yeah. When he presses, Clarice about the lambs, and you couldn't stop the lambs, just all those different types of conversations where when he wants stuff, he can be nice, but then when he's pressing, he sounds, I was like, I don't think I'd want to have a conversation with him regardless, either way. So they're looking for the serial killer Buffalo Bill. There's a series of murders and women that have been found, and different parts of their bodies are missing. So they're trying to figure out who this person is, what the motive is. They really don't, they have some killings, but other than that, they don't have a whole lot. So, but it's for me, like that's almost very secondary. Oh, it's very secondary and let me get to the question then. I think this is a good spot for it. Is this really a horror film? Because there was, it's the first horror film to win, but I watched it today and I'm kind of like, let's start with Kelly. I mean, is this really a horror film?
No, I mean, I always considered it a psychological thriller. Uh-huh. I never would have put it in a horror category, but I do know that it went on our horror list for Halloween this year. So I guess some people disagree with me, but I just always felt like it was a psychological thriller, and that's, but that's not really a separate category.
Yeah. Nick, what do you think?
I think
police procedural or horror film. Which is it closer to?
It's got those subgenres, but it's totally a horror film. And I think the fact that people try to say it's not a horror film just shows why there's been no other horror movie that's ever won Best Picture. There is this kind of stigma to horror movies, but it's a well done, awesome horror movie. I mean, he's a serial killer. There's blood and the way he kills, and it's like. So yes, it is also a psychological thriller. It's also a police procedural, but at its heart, it's a horror movie.
Okay, Eric,
I agree. I agree with Nick. It definitely, the fact that it gets under your skin, the fact that it makes you, the suspense of it, the unnerving that you constantly feel, even in the interview scenes between the exchange, and like you pointed out, when he doesn't get his way. And she's trying to get her way, and they're going back and forth. Those scenes, and consider the music that's playing, even Howard Shore with the score, it's very tense music, and throughout, even in the quiet scenes, there's this underlying feeling of tension and dread. So I absolutely consider it a horror movie. It's very, I would say it's my kind of horror film. It's not your typical blood and guts
slasher.
I prefer, I asked Kelly, I said, how would you compare this to, say, something like Seven? Mm-hmm. Like David Fincher's Seven, and it's like that one is a little bit more on the horror, giving you the gore, giving you the more intensity of it. I kind of consider them in the same sort of in the same category, same vein. Police procedural, serial killer, but 7 was obviously a little bit more, out there. But yeah,
well,
absolutely.
I think that's why I kind of don't consider it a horror movie, because I do consider it in the same vein as 7, but I feel like there's a different like hokiness to certain horror. Like a lot of the horror movies have like this very basic formulation, and I feel like these kind of break out of that a little bit and just are more psychological, and something that's more, you have to, your imagination actually propels it a lot more than just what you're seeing on the screen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Can we agree that the Tennessee Police Department was woefully unprepared?
Oh yeah.
It doesn't sound like they got it sounds like Clarice got more advice about Lecter than poor Charles Napier, who plays Lieutenant Boyle. They're sitting there reading the newspaper at a desk.
Oh my god!
It was like they were guarding a guy that broke into a house. There's like a big cage with some police stands around it, and here's your dinner, Lecter. Dinner's served, and it's Can you move my art, please? Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, and there's what's the thing? It's funny when Charles, the actor Charles Napier, who plays Boyle, when he rolls up the drawings and he moves the drawings, there's a copy of Bon Appetit magazine on the table.
Yeah.
Below the drawings. Again, just a little things that you got to pick up. But those two guys, Pembry and Boyle, two guys. It was like the Keystone Cops. Those two.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Eric. Go ahead, you first.
No, absolutely. You pointed out that they have this elaborate cage and all of this manpower downstairs. They're all in the lobby. Why are you sitting in the lobby and the elevators? Oh, look! The elevator stops on 4, and they're like, okay, so you're all downstairs. Why the fuck aren't you upstairs guarding this guy? Yeah,
they're waiting for the elevator to come down. Take the fucking stairs. What? Yeah, it stopped on 3.
But again, it really leans into, and there's a little bit of humor in that as well. I think Demi was really having a lot of fun and trying to direct that horror aspect, because even every cop is scared shitless. Yeah, they don't want to go upstairs. They're all like, "Whoa, holy crap!"
Except for Chris Isaac.
Chris Isaac, yeah.
With
randomly, Chris Isaac is.
Why the hell did he get? He got something like 4th billing or something like that? And
he's got the same agent as Julianne Moore had for The Fugitive. That's
he's in it for literally a minute or two. I didn't get that. I was just
so funny.
But he mostly does hand motions.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, okay, cool, but it's just kind of I just needed to bring that out about the cops, Nick. I'm sorry,
but it's a fact. It just shows how he was so out of their league. The fact that he was able to escape like that, everything from the air, he just had it brilliantly planned. But I did feel sympathy for the cops, because they made mistakes, but you could see they were following procedure. We don't trust you. We have to tie your, chain you to the, before we could bring in your food and everything else. But he just had all he needed was that little something. And that was it. They were done.
It was patience. Lecter was patient and just waiting.
Methodical.
Waiting for the right time. He had that piece of the pen just kind of stowed away and waiting until, probably, obviously very methodical thinker. So like Eric said, he probably had everything planned out of this needs to happen in this way in order for me to execute. Now, and I'm not going to execute it until these things are in the right order for me to do it.
Cutting his face so he can have the face over him, and people think it's him, so they'll just take him out. But that's where you see what a cold-blooded serial killer he is. I remember seeing that for the first time. I was like, you were horrified. You were frightened at what he could do. You finally could see that, right, Kelly?
Yeah, that is where seeing this multiple times comes in, because I remember just being so blown away by his way that he planned all this out. And like, how do you think about putting the body on the top of the, the elevator shaft to buy yourself some more time? And, all that time, all of those things he's like planned out. So I was so impressed by everything he did that it wasn't until like the second or third time I saw it that I was like, oh my gosh, these guys died. Like these guys murdered in a horrible way, But
well, who's the guy like on the cage?
Oh, man.
Guts
that was loyal.
It's like splayed open and like wow, and it almost makes him look like an angel, like with the lighting and everything. It's like he's so evil.
Yeah, even to the point when they had Lecter, who had Pembrey's face on, when the paramedics got to the top floor, they started administering aid. And what did Lecter do? He started faking a seizure. It's like, we got to get him out of here. This way, they weren't going to like keep him in the building any longer or do things like give him IVs or anything that would have probably maybe compromised him. So he starts faking a seizure. Like, we forget all that. We got to get him in the ambulance. He's coding. We'll get him out to get him out of the building. That was the only way they're going to get him out of the building, which was pretty brilliant. And Kelly, you mentioned it earlier about when Lecter got the baton, and it was a very balletic scene because the classical music is playing, and the way he's swinging it is very. It wasn't rage and serial. It wasn't. It was very deliberate and artistic the way he was doing it. It wasn't like like Mel Gibson in The Patriot with the hatchet. Like, it wasn't like that type of rage. It was very refined way of killing. Almost, that he was listening to the music and it was conducting. Exactly.
Composing this murder. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah.
Like how long was he like locked up? Like, who knows before he did his last killing? Because to me, it felt like somebody who'd been starved.
He said 8 years.
Yeah, and hadn't killed anybody. And here he was. So like that to me was like just somebody who was like, finally, I can kill again. Like it was almost
enjoy
like
savoring it. Yeah.
Which just again more chilling and scary when you think about it, right?
Yeah. He was savoring the kill. Like this is just beautiful, and I'm going to enjoy it. Let's talk. Let's talk a little bit about Ted Levine as Buffalo Bill. James Gumb. Not in the film. I mean, he's not very consequential. I'm gonna be honest. He's kind of there.
I don't know where you're coming up with this stuff. This part with him and that it was a huge.
No, I'm not saying that it's not that. Meaning that he's kind of like he's there and he's just kind of like lurking around, dropping the bucket. For me, it was kind of. I didn't find him as terrifying. He was doing terrifying things, but we really, really didn't see that. We saw him abduct. We saw him abduct the woman, and then we just see him kind of being, for my money, we kind of see him just being weird in the house, but he's this threatening guy. I get that he's this threatening guy, but he's arguing with her.
But you could put him in the same category as Miggs or one of the,
absolutely,
reprobates in the other cells. Like they're he's not very intelligent. He's not very, he's good at what he does. Like I guess artistically, given the skin and all that stuff. So I mean, he's brilliant in that aspect, but he's not very good at she, even the daughter, the girl that he has in the well, like she gets to him, like he's put the children in the basket, like he's like, but it's just Stottlemyre.
Yeah.
I can't believe it's the same guy, it's crazy. But I guess he's just a means to it, it is what do they call it? Plot fodder.
He's a plot device. Yeah,
he's like the MacGuffin of the it's like that's what they need to have the whole Clarice but he is still, I think, a complex character because they talk about him before, like, he tries to dehumanize them. He doesn't want to think of them as humans, so refers to them. Mm-hmm. And then you see him enacting that. Like, it puts it in the basket. Like, doesn't want to make it like a... So the dog, he's more like Precious, right? The little dog. He's showing affection for the dog. So the victim, too, this is a great twist, too, where, like, she's kind of empowering as well because she gets the dog and she plays a part in it too, like, so I think that's great as well. Like, there's a bunch of things that are tropes now that people do that this kind of for the first time was making it so it's not just your stereotypical horror movie, but it has all those elements.
Yeah, I think you know what it is. I think because we were told more about him than we were shown. You know, we were told about the moths. We were told about the sewing. We didn't really see that. We just kind of see him walking around the house. He's kind of weird, and yeah, he's doing some things. He's got this girl, and he grabbed her. But everything we learn about him is being told to us.
Interesting.
And maybe that maybe would have put it over the edge for a true horror film had we seen some of that. Maybe they didn't want to go there. You know, I don't know, but so that's why I like I said in the beginning, for my money, this movie is about the two leads and their performances, and most of the other stuff, like it's kind of more of a plot device to it's
the subplot of
to move the story along, and yeah, he's great. Ted Levine's a great actor and he does a great job, but it was kind of, they could have almost cut, and it was almost a similar story like they had in Manhunter or Red Dragon. Pick your poison, because Red Dragon's a remake of Manhunter anyway. It's the same thing. They're trying to catch Dollarhide, and you need to consult with Lecter. So that the stories are very similar, Kelly.
Yeah, but you cannot take away. And when you were saying we were going to stick to like the Clarice and Hannibal story, the editing in this movie is so phenomenal. Like from the part where she's telling her story of childhood, normally you would be taken to that flashback and stay in that flashback for a period and then they cut in and out of her flashback to where she's in real a couple of times. And the whole doorbell scene is the best, like, fools, you're totally taken on
red
that
herring.
path.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, red herring. Thank you. So you can't get away from the Buffalo Bill story and not have that amazing scene and the whole, where he can see her and she can't see him.
Yeah.
It's a great climax to Starling's story, and this is where she comes out and proves herself, right? She's totally alone. I mean, the Crawford in that big ass plane. He's sitting in the plane. He's like in the confines of this big military. I never understood that. Like this, this thing, and even then, it's like I pointed out, how cold she, we couldn't have found you without you, Starling. And then he just, the phone cuts out, and she's calling out to him, but he's already hung up in the plane. You see the plane veering away.
Yeah, like banks to the left, like
it banks to the left,
crash landing.
Yeah, but it's like even then it's like, she's on her own. You know what I mean? Yeah. But it's a brilliant, but like Kelly pointed out, that you just, so the way they set that up was just, was great.
Yeah, but Nick, before I get to you though, I guess the fugitive stole that from Silence of the Lambs. Because they did the same thing when they went to the house, and you thought they were catching Harrison Ford, and they went to the other guy's house instead, right? It was the same kind of bait and switch.
That's right.
Where you thought it was they were going to Harrison Ford's house. Oh, we found it. He picked up a job. He picked up a hitchhiker.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then 2 years later, they recycled that formula. I just wanted to get that in.
And I love that in The Fugitive, but this did it better, because I was gonna say when I saw this in the movie theater, this was like in February when it first came out. The audience went. They were like, "What?" They were screaming. They're like, it was great, because you don't see it coming, and they do it so subtly. And it's not like where you feel like cheated. You're like, they got. It was like you're like, I should have seen it all along. Like it was perfect and seamless, and it really works. And the tension. The only thing that gets me with that scene is like, she's lucky that she survived, because he had the chance to kill her, right? But it just also shows his psychosis too. Like he's not thinking of her as like a human being. It's just like, I'm in control. I got the night vision, just like when he's hunting out and getting somebody else, right, Kelly? I mean, it's just like
and he doesn't kill his victims immediately. That's his whole thing. So that's his MO, where he, he has to play with them a little bit longer. And the really unnerving part is her screaming down there, and Starling's trying to figure out what her next move is, and she's like, "Don't leave me!" Shut up!
Yeah, she's like, you fucking bitch! I'm like, shut up! Like she's here. like she's here to save you. Be quiet because you're giving it away. I would have liked Jodie Foster to say, you shut up for a minute.
Well, that's the thing too. But she's like, FBI, you're safe. I don't think so. Not yet. Not quite yet. A little jump in the gun there, but it shows her, she had to say something, but obviously she, there's that greenness a little bit of her making probably the wrong call there. You could just see somebody coming out. You shouldn't have said that at that moment. You need to check your corners, and then, and as Nick pointed out, it all plays out, right? Even like the fact that he doesn't kill her because I was always affected. I'm like her panting like the whole time. He's loving this. Like, I guess Bill, like he's like watching her, like almost like panting like a dog, like a scared dog in that scene. I considered that last night when I was watching it too. It's like, because that always annoyed me. Like, all right, the panting is like, it gets on your nerves, but that's effective. It's supposed to, so yeah, but
I mean, but she did use her training though. Cause in the scene where she gets to where that well is, what she does is she goes to each door and she checks it, and then she closes each door. So she does almost kind of like lock her. I thought the plan would be, okay, I'm going to lock myself in the room with the well because I've closed all the doors, so no one's going to bust out without me knowing it. But then she goes to that last door and decides to then go through and check the rest of the house where she could have. So she was using her smarts by kind of closing each door behind her. This way, it's kind of like, okay, if something happens, it's going to happen in this room unless I decide to leave, which is then what she decided to do was to kind of start to go check the house where she could have just waited there, and eventually they would have come. But I'm not down on the character. I mean, that was a very high tension scene and very necessary to resolve the whole thing, and like I said, maybe Clarice also represented what James was trying to be, right? He was trying to be a woman like that, right? And he was trying to be that, and maybe he was going to capture her. I mean, he probably had to kill her because she knew, and he didn't know if she had walkie-talkied anybody or anything. So he was going to have to kill her. But yeah, there was that kind of, like Kelly said, that kind of toying with her, and he was like, I don't really need to kill her right this second because I've got the god. And that was kind of a creepy scene because all you see is just his, Jonathan Demme did a lot of those close-ups, and it was just like his face, just with the goggles on, and he's not doing anything.
Yeah,
it's just his face, just staring. He's just kind of standing in the shadows, just watching her fumble through and watching her stumble and fall and reach for the wall and try and get through, and then they'll just cut to his face with the goggles, with the one, the one eye, it's just kind of really, really creepy stuff, Nick.
Yeah, totally creepy. And you mentioned about maybe he wanted to be a woman, and like there's that point where Hannibal Lecter's like, he thinks he does, but it's almost like he doesn't know. Like, he's obviously a disturbed individual, but it's not so cookie cutter. Like a lesser horror movie would have been like, this is what he wants. This is his motivation, and there's so much that we still don't know. And it's a shame that he gets killed because like you'd want him maybe to be in the sequel or something like that. Cause
no, it's not a shame. He needed to, Nick. He needed to go. He needed to go.
Well, and you understand a little bit more like about Frederica, the fact that she was the third. Obviously, he had made a connection with her, and that's why she was handled differently, and she was the first but the third to be found, because obviously there was something about her that he probably felt somewhat safe or somewhat heard by her, because you can tell that it was like and that was another great scene where she's deducing, like she sees that the dress that she's making, and she sees the diamonds, and it's like, she puts it together, and it's like, that leads them.
Yeah, and that's creepy. That part's creepy.
How many times?
It's like, he's making a suit. It's like, I'm glad we didn't get to that point too. They showed it like when Clarice is walking through the house and she goes into the room and there's like the mannequin and it's got like it's partially built.
Yeah.
I'm glad that would have put it over the top to horror too. I'm glad, what it is maybe the restraint is for me what pulls this more into the psychological aspects of it, because they didn't go there were plenty of opportunities to go.
Yeah.
And like I said, maybe a lesser director, or if they were trying for something else, they could have easily taken any right or left turn, and it wouldn't have seemed out of character for the film, and it wouldn't have seemed that gratuitous. But by not doing that, I think it kind of kept it maybe to where audiences did accept this as, I think afterwards, I think they were calling it a horror film, and it was the first horror, but I think when it came out, I don't think people were looking at it that way.
But at the same time, it's like, it's a shame that horror movies have to be thought of as like gratuitous or gory to be. And I know a lot of horror fans that are like that. I go to some horror marathons and it's like, there wasn't enough blood. There wasn't enough, beheadings and stuff like that. And it's a shame that that's where the horror genre has gone. And maybe that's why it gets its bad stigma, because you look at Psycho and you look at some of these other horror movies, which are clearly horror movies, and they don't have some of that. And even, seeing The Exorcist, it had its moments, but like compared to the horror movies of today, it's kind of like, not that,
very tame, very tame.
But again, even with The Exorcist, we pointed out how psychological it was. And
for sure.
That's the film's strongest, the strongest thing about the film is that it puts you in a certain place. So even when these horrific things do happen, it's surreal. It almost kind of feels like, because you're already unnerved. You're already in that place, in that headspace. And I find that, as a viewer, walking out of the theater, seeing this film, I felt like, man, I was on the edge of my seat the entire time, but not because it was exciting, but because I was genuinely frightened. I was frightened for Jodie Foster. I was just so uncomfortable watching this film, but loving it, like at the same time. But it's like, so that to me is, it's all about how it makes you feel. I feel like that is the the definition of horror, in the sense of, because you're horrified by it, you're just, if you feel fear or scared, and it's like, you're kind of hesitant to watch it again right away. Yeah. It's done its job,
Kelly, before I get to you, I think for me, I think good horror or effective horror actually leaves more to the imagination, because a lot of times your imagination is worse. Yeah. Much like the ear scene in Reservoir Dogs, right? Everybody thinks they remember that ear being cut off, but it's never shown. It's the camera pans away, and you're left to just hearing it, to then in your mind map what is happening. And I think that's where Silence of the Lambs excels, as well as The Exorcist, right? Is kind of, hearing things or being told things, and then leaving enough blank space for you to fill in the gaps in your own with your own stuff, is kind of a better way to do it. And I think that's where it succeeds, Kelly.
Yeah, and that was the point I was going to make too, is what you were saying, the restraint. And if you think about it, Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Silence of the Lambs, both of these villains were written to reflect Ed Gein, who was a real serial killer. And when you look at the link that Texas Chainsaw did with showing the gore and showing that, and compare it to how they restrained, to your point, that just puts you in a different feeling. They're both horrifying. It's just a different horrifying feeling, because honestly, some of those horror movies, I can laugh off a lot easier than something that feels so real. Like,
Yeah, you make a good point. When, like I said, when you're putting your own stuff into it, then you're internalizing it more. Yeah. Right, because you're providing the material that they're not, or you're imagining things, and that's why like reading a book is like that too, right? They're describing it, but then in your mind you're drawing the picture, you're creating the image, and I think that's probably where this movie excels the most, and that's where all that tension is in the performances, in Anthony Hopkins, always kind of on the edge. And you never know. And then finally there's that release when he escapes. Like, it's been building up to that, where he's just kind of been, all his machinations with the fake deal that they gave him to go to this island. And then Chilton makes a different deal. And then there was that scene with the governor, right? Or the senator, or whatever. That was just kind of like, when your daughter's on the slab, I'm like,
take this thing back to Baltimore. Well, I need to point out too, like how strong, like the women in this film are the real heroes. I mean, they're, it might have been, what we're dealing with today in terms of like pushing the feminism in film and TV and such, but this film, it really was in its day, and it holds up very well, I think.
It does
in that aspect, so, because, her and Kasi Lemmons, like Kelly pointed out, was, you like that relationship. I wish I could have seen more of her or have her more involved in this situation, because she turned out to be a brilliant director. Eve's Bayou was a great film. I like that a lot. But to see that camaraderie, and they were totally alone in this world of, at that point, still very much a world of men, and just, they're still, in control, as it were, like this is the man's world. Even the FBI is like, we're dealing with, but like you pointed out, like even the stills, like I saw that as a still, like of all the men standing there and her like really short, like I didn't consider that was actually in the film. But it is, so it's, but
and even the woman, even the final victim, Catherine Martin, she also, kind of, takes control, right? She lures Precious into the bucket, and then she's got the, let the dog go, and she's like, oh, I think his leg is broken. I think he needs a vet. She's like squeezing him, the dog's like, and she even asserts herself, because I mean that's all she's got. That's her only play.
I mean, she knows there's no.
What are you going to do? Yeah, and that's when he goes to get the gun too, right? He's like, I'll just kill her. I'll just shoot her from down there. But it never gets that far. But yeah, you see the women in the film kind of really just asserting themselves in. And a lot's been made, in later years about the feminism and about the role of how women are played, the politics of women in the FBI and all the other things. But I think this movie makes a strong case for that, to show that, and we see that, we visually see that they're making her seem smaller, yet she's still, especially in the scene with the autopsy, she's throwing all the guys out because we've done everything you could for the family. We thank you, but now you got to get out. And they're all kind of like looking. They're kind of like, what? Like, what the fuck? And
never once does she put herself out there like that, though. She never, Jodie Foster, you don't hear her saying, I'm a woman. And, none of that is mentioned. It's just, she's just doing what she needs to do to survive in this, in the surroundings, in her surroundings. So she's always been brought up by men. Her mother died when she was 10. Her dad took care of her. She was everything. He was everything to her. He dies. And then she goes to live on this farm and even when Hannibal Lecter, when Lecter's like telling her like, oh, so he must have been, did he like,
he molested you? And
he was a very decent man, so she loved the men in her life. They were very important to her. It's just, but yeah, so there's a notion that she knows how to take care of herself. And I think that goes a long way in being raised by these strong male figures in her life, so that, so she is prepared for this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So it's like even Lecter's showing her a whole different side of psychology and really, getting in her head and just, really helping her prepare for what's to come in her career as an FBI agent, because the worst probably yet to come. I'm sure this is her first case, and not even like she's not even a real agent yet, consider like, she's involved in this whole rigmarole here going on. And then even the choice of song and music in them, like Tom Petty's American Girl, and the girl's just like singing on the top of her lungs to that. I mean, it adds to that, the strength of that, that you enjoy watching those kinds of scenes.
Yeah.
Well, that was kind of what, when I saw that scene, it put you in a certain place. And there's been times where, you're hyped up from listening to that song. No wonder she was so vulnerable to him, because it's it's like an empowering moment where she's just like, and then she's like, no, I'm home. My cat's up there. Like you're not thinking there's anything that's going to happen. And he was just skillful in knowing where those buttons were.
And she clearly showed that she wasn't like passive. Like she offers to help him, and he knew that. Like he knew that he's pushing the cat, and he counted on that. So in a way,
with the fake hurt arm.
Yeah, so in a way, he kind of anticipated these strong female, you know, but I don't think he really anticipated her like fighting back. Where he got into, the other girls or the poor victims, they didn't quite get there. But,
Yeah.
Well, I'm
Kelly,
wondering, obviously, I don't think that he knew that her mom was a public figure when so you also think about that, like just bad timing or
pick the
worst
wrong
person.
victim.
Yeah, because I don't think the FBI would have been so involved. And that's the thing
Yeah.
too, is
Yeah.
like she got lucky because it probably wouldn't have made it to that level, just some random girl missing. But because of who she was, it became this.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. What do you say? Favorite scenes? Are there favorite scenes in a movie like this?
Yeah.
Can there? Nick is saying yes. So let's let Nick go first.
I love that whole scene with the scenes with Hannibal Lecter in the prison cell. All of that is great. I love how when he's leaning there, kind of licking his finger, just turning the pages, like looking at her, just like his physicality, every choice that he made. I'm curious how much was in the script, how much was inspired by the book, or how much was just him. Like I read that his voice. He used Truman Capote and Hal from 2001. But the physicality too, like just like you wonder like where he got that, so that all of that, those are my favorite scenes.
Yeah, cool. Kelly?
I would say, the obvious one is the whole doorbell, that red herring, or as you were saying. But I also really love the scene where I don't remember her roommate's name. I can never remember people's names, but when they're sitting there and they're like going back and forth and like figuring things out, like, and it's like you were saying, the close-ups on their face, it's like right here and they're going back and forth. I love that scene too. I think that's an amazing shot.
Eric?
Well, the two scenes of where you find out what the movie's really about, and I refer back to the poster art, and you realize, okay, well, that now it makes sense. What is the moth thing? What is that all about? What's the whole like, all these like sort of jigsaw puzzle pieces being put together just by this conversation of revealing herself to him and what she went through with the lamb and the screaming and it's a powerful thing. It's like that kind of sets just that little note, that little piece of story right there is the title of the film. And it's like, it has nothing to do with serial killers or whatever, but it's like, and it's everything. Yet it's everything. It kind of, so I love that. I love those two, that one, with the scene before, and then of course the scene later on with the quick, where they finish that up. Where she's first talking to him, and then in the cage where he's, and she's being ushered out, and there's tension in that scene too, because time is running out, and he's like, "Oh, I got nothing left for you," so that again, it's just that the constant tension of it, So both those scenes together is everything right there for me. That's the heart and soul of the film. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the quid pro quo, Clarice.
Yeah,
the first one, like kind of trading information, and you could almost say that Jonathan Demme almost overuses close-ups in this film. But what it does is when Hannibal Lecter is asking Clarice about her childhood, and she's answering, she's looking at us. It's not an over the shoulder. It's not a two shot. And when Hannibal Lecter is talking to her, he's looking at us. He's looking through us. So it puts you squarely in the conversation. You're not looking at it from far away, and the camera's not, kind of artfully moving around them. It's always, you're looking at her. You're seeing her uncomfortableness, but then her frankness about how she answers the questions, even when they're uncomfortable, or when she's remembering, when she's like I said, when she's recounting when she ran away. And then she's like, quid pro quo, doctor, I gave you something. Now, this, don't forget, we're trading information here. So now you got to give me something. And so I really like that's their second interaction, but it's the first quid pro quo where they kind of are kind of giving and taking. But throughout this it's a movie of close-ups of almost you being a part of this, of you being the sometimes you're Starling, sometimes you're Lecter. It's very invasive. You're very much inside these conversations, and you're the one that's getting the information and having to look in their eyes. Because there's nowhere else to look. It's not like I said, it's not really a far shot where you can look at the side of the cell and see what's going on there. It's like these faces are squarely in front of you, and there's nowhere else to look unless you're not going to watch the movie. With those interactions, Nick.
Yeah, and another thing you mentioned about his choice not to use bars but to use the glass, and one thing that gives him is the reflection. Yeah. Like I love some of those shots where you can see the reflection of the other character when you're looking at. I thought that was great because you put them together when you couldn't do that through bars. I thought that was
or you didn't want to do a 2-shot, right? Because that would take. He's Jonathan Demme has kind of set the playing the rules for this film, right? It's going to be that very intimate and unnerving of watching it, and to come out of that with for those scenes it would kind of be like, oh wow, okay, it would be kind of weird. So yeah, using the glass to then show a reflection every so often kind of still puts you there, but it's a brilliant way to get the point across. So anybody got any final thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
Well, I just know it's Kelly. What I asked Kelly, I said, "This is one of your top 10 favorite films of ever," and she, right. You so immediately answered yes because it's just so rewatchable.
Yeah,
just from the sheer.
That's really my only criteria for if it makes in my top 10. If I've seen it more than a couple times, because I'm not a rewatcher. It's like once I've seen something, it's like it can make a big impact. But if I can just watch it over and over and over,
so this is right behind The Wedding Singer for you, right?
Yeah.
That would be a good double feature.
Right? Yeah. We should do an episode of putting like two movies, but we have to tie them together somehow, but ones that don't seem like they would go together. But no, that's great. That's going to do it for this episode. Silence of the Lambs, one of only 3 films in Oscar history to win the Big Five. So it's got a special place. It's got I don't know that another film will ever do it again anyway. So I think that kind of sensation has kind of maybe left us. Titanic might have been the closest it might have come, but because it got like 12 nominations, so it was bound to come close. Some movies have gotten 4 out of the 5, but only 3 films have gotten the coveted Big Five, and this is one of them. So that's going to do it for this episode of the 3324 podcast. Join us on Facebook, won't you? We've got a great group there. You can post stuff about music and movies. You can interact. You can leave comments. It's just a great group of people there, a great bunch of folks that kind of check in every day. And we encourage and invite you to join us there. It's a good place. We interact. We post. We comment. And it's a great time. And if you're still with us on YouTube, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't done it in the beginning. That helps you get notified when we've got new episodes coming out your way. So that's going to do it for the 3rd episode of our 2nd year of Best Picture Oscar winners. You'll have to tune in next week to see what our final episode will be, our final Best Oscar winning film. Even Nick doesn't. Well, actually, Nick does know. He sent it out. I thought I was being slick. All these people know because I sent out the list to see if they wanted to do it. I'm so stupid. That was a red herring, Kelly. That didn't work.
I would have gone with it if you had not, because the audience doesn't know.
Nick was ready.
I was ready to play it. So.
Nick was ready to play along at home. But for Mr. Nick Leshy, City of Kick podcast, City of Kick blog. There'll be a link in the show notes. Go check him out. He's got a lot of great material over there. And if you go check it out, that's going to make him feel guilty. He's got to write some more.
I know. Then I got to write more.
Exactly. See? So we're putting the onus on him to get his fingers on those keys and start tapping away. Hey, why don't you do an article about being a guest on a podcast?
I've done that already.
Oh,
it's in there.
Time to update it.
I hear how much you read.
It's time for an updated version. Nick, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Kelly Cooper, always great to have you here. It's not often enough, but when she's here, we always have a great time. So Kelly, thank you so much for joining us as well. Always fun. And of course, as usual, Eric and I are going to be glued. Our cheeks will be in the seats until our next episode. We ain't going anywhere. We're sitting right here. And we're going to be here with our next episode. And we look forward to it. And thank you again for anybody that's new. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. And the ones that have been here all the time, we're more than happy to continue to bring you what we think is the best in movie and music podcasting, because it's true. It is the best.
It is.
So for Nick, for Kelly, for Eric, this has been Dean, and we will ask you to please be kind. Go ahead and rewind.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.